Good morning, Night City! Yesterday's body count lottery rounded out to a solid and sturdy 30. 10 out of Haywood, thanks to unabated gang wars. One officer down, so I guess you're all screwed, cause the NCPD will not let that go. Got another blackout in Santo Domingo. Netrunners are at it again, poking holes in the power grid. While over in Westbrook, trauma teams scraping cyber psycho victims off the pavement. And in Pacifica, well, Pacifica is still Pacifica. This has been your man, Stan. Join me for another day in our city of dreams.
Usually I would start off a video with a funny joke or maybe ask that you subscribe to my channel, but this time I need to start it with a warning. This is going to be a very heavy and at times very political video because there is no way to cover the themes and tone of this game's writing without going to some pretty dark places. There is no way to discuss the cyberpunk genre without discussing its political and social implications and then relating that commentary to the real world we live in. This has always been the goal of the genre ever since 1984 when William Gibson started it all by writing Neuromancer. This book, this genre, and the game we are about to discuss hold an important place in my heart, and I can't disrespect the work of the people responsible for them by not taking it as seriously as I can. So if you aren't ready to confront what might be some pretty harsh topics, maybe skip this video. I will also be dropping spoilers without any mercy or warning periodically over the course of the video, so discretion is advised for people who haven't played the game yet. I will also be making a lot of references to the cyberpunk genre of fiction. If you're interested in learning about how the genre works or its history, or you want some additional context for this video, I discuss all of that a lot in my video on the cyberpunk horror game Observer. But even if you've never seen that video, you should be okay. The development and launch of Cyberpunk 2077 has been rocky to say the least, and I'm not here to defend CDPR for how any of it was handled. The delays, the working conditions, and the various controversies that have followed the game during development, as well as the state of the game's release on console, are all pretty abysmal. I can't defend some poor developer having to pull a 16-hour shift to finish the subsurface scattering on Penis 2. Yes, the game is buggy. Yes, CDPR as a company has made some questionable decisions. But it is my hope that after some time has passed and most of the bugs have been patched, people will be able to take a deeper look at this game and come to appreciate how incredible its finer aspects really are. The actual programmers, artists, and actors and writers that poured thousands of collective hours into making this game have really achieved something incredible, and I'm here to prove it. We should probably start out with the part of the script that is going to be the least depressing, which is covering the game's actual surface-level gameplay. I've seen a lot of criticism that implies the actual gameplay of Cyberpunk isn't all that new or interesting, and by and large, this is accurate. On paper, we're dealing with the same open-world formula that we have been seeing for decades at this point, from franchises like Grand Theft Auto, Elder Scrolls, Fallout, and so on. You've got quests, or in this case jobs, side jobs, and all sorts of encounters around the map. You're free to do all of this in whatever order you want. This type of game design at this point is pretty cliche and exactly in line with what you would expect from a AAA open-world title. Let's get into character customization. Not this part of character customization, the part after that. Cyberpunk, like any RPG of this type, has a leveling system that includes attributes and perks. Your attributes are body, cool, intelligence, reflexes, and technical ability, and within each group of attributes, you'll have various perks you can unlock for all kinds of passive bonuses. The attributes themselves will offer you different passive benefits, different speech options, and will sometimes allow you to approach situations differently by being able to access certain doors or hack certain terminals. All very standard and what you should be used to in video games by now. The actual bonuses you get from the perks themselves are similarly standard and won't really alter the gameplay that dramatically over the course of the game. This entire build system, combined with the pretty uninspired open world mechanics, I think are in large part why a lot of people are coming away a little disappointed with their experience from the perspective of gameplay. And I can't necessarily disagree with them, because this isn't at all what I found to be the most engaging part about the game either. Even the cyberware you can outfit your character with isn't all that game-changing. Apart from the gorilla arms and mantis blades, which function as melee weapons, and some mods that can improve your jumping, there isn't a lot going on here. Subdermal armor that increases your defense by a percentage isn't exactly the most groundbreaking idea, and most of the cyberware mods are like this. If you're going for a build that is high in intelligence and is taking a lot of perks related to hacking for a hack-heavy playstyle, it will be important to update your operating system, but other than that, I can easily see someone playing through this entire game without even bothering with any cyberware in the first place. Especially since it can be pretty expensive, and you might be more interested in spending your money on punk t-shirts, expensive cars, or better weapons. Speaking of hacking, the game's major hacking mechanics revolve around the use of quick hacks that are sort of pre-loaded into your cyber deck and can be used quickly on the fly just by getting line of sight with a target. This is a very press X to hack type of system, and while it absolutely is fun to hack an enemy's eyes and walk right by them during a stealth section, this system, I can assume, isn't blowing that many minds. I suppose that brings us to combat, which is also pretty standard. The gunplay is good, but it isn't incredible, and it does suffer from a lot of the issues that have plagued the FPS RPG genre for years. Bullet sponge enemies, for example, are one of the FPS RPG's biggest sources of immersion-breaking goofiness, and they're sort of required to exist if you're going to have a game that has guns and also character progression. Early on in the game, you might run across some enemies that can eat an entire magazine of ammo, and that kind of feels awkward. The stronger your character's weapons become, and the farther you progress into picking up perks that increase your damage, the less of a noticeable problem this is. In the late game, gunfights can start to feel pretty solid, and all of the secondary traits that go into making gunplay feel amazing in video games, like heavy sound design and crisp reload animations, are all here. There are some fun shakeups to standard gameplay, like tech weapons that can shoot through enemy cover and the ability to ricochet your shots, but overall, this just isn't an experience that I would consider new. That being said, gunfights are still fun, and they do what they need to do in the context of the game's design, and general combat mechanics themselves are well built. If you like standard, safe, AAA open world experiences, then you will like the gameplay of Cyberpunk on a surface level. And just to be extremely clear here, when I use words like standard and safe, these are not synonymous with bad. Sure, these aspects of the game aren't going to come off as revolutionary, but they also aren't poorly done either. And it's important to remember that if you're someone like me, who has been playing games for a very long time, At this point, you've probably played just about every open world experience out there, from Fallout to Skyrim to the PS4 Spider-Man or Assassin's Creed or whatever. And if that's the case, ask yourself a very important question. Is this type of AAA formula bad game design, or am I just tired of it? Like all great questions, the answer is probably a little bit of both. All of this also isn't to say, however, that there aren't some high points and twists on this style that Cyberpunk pulls off to help spice it up. There was a lot of detail that went into making Night City feel like as living of a city as possible. From the dozens of citizens walking around to the sound design that highlights the city's perpetual state of violence. How V interacts with various characters over the course of the story also adds a nice feeling of human realism. Whenever a character needs to contact you, they will call you or send you a text, and there are a lot of times where you just need to sort of wait a couple of days for their call.
So, what now? Gotta think. We need more bodies, that's for sure. I'm gonna talk to the dolls. I'll call you when I've got something. See you later, V, and thanks.
This isn't set up like a normal open world game where you need to go to the NPC and they give you the thing to do. It's actually the other way around. And this small detail goes a long way to making the various characters in Cyberpunk actually feel a little bit more like people. The system also incentivizes the player to mess around and explore the city and do various side jobs while they're waiting on calls to get back into the important story missions. The farther you get into the game, the more people will be calling you and offering work, and the more you feel like your reputation in the city is organically growing. And the closer V gets to some of the more important characters to the core story, the more it feels like relationships are organically growing. Characters will often send you follow-up texts on how they're doing after big jobs, drunk text you from the bar, or send you various forms of threats depending on how you end up completing their storylines, and it all feels very alive. For all of this game's failings, how it writes and presents the human element is pretty much flawless, and it's something that I'll cover more once I start getting into individual character analysis. Some of these relationships can even grow into one of the game's several romance options, which are also handled well. Usually when I hear that a game is going to have romance options, the entire idea makes me roll my eyes, and then when I hear there is going to be sex scenes, I roll them even harder. 99% of the time, if a game is going to go this route, it's going to be poorly written, fan service bullshit with some raunchy sex scenes for the gamers to hoot and holler over on their online image boards. Fortunately though, Cyberpunk handles this in a significantly more mature and well-written way. In most games with romance options, you'll find that most, if not all, of the characters that are approachable by the player will just so happen to be attracted to the player, no matter what, as long as the player jumps through whatever hoops they need to in-game. In Cyberpunk, this is not the case. Most characters in Cyberpunk have well-defined sexualities, like most real human beings, and if they just aren't into you, then no matter how much you try, you're going to get shot down spectacularly.
Got a few ideas. Think you know what kind. V... No. It's really nice as is. Let's not spoil it, okay?
And because a lot of these scenes are written and acted so convincingly, shooting down another character can genuinely feel painful.
Listen, River. If you expect this to evolve somehow.
Don't stand a chance, do I?
Maybe we keep it at friends?
Yeah, sure. All right. We can still have a drink.
All of this not only helps the characters feel more like people and not just NPCs, but it makes it a little bit more exciting when you actually land with someone. You aren't owed a relationship as part of the game's design, and that's kind of a refreshing and respectful way of handling it in a video game. And it's reflective of the writers actually taking the effort to write real characters. I obviously can't show you the sex scenes, but I would describe them as nice. The level of raunch you get kind of depends on the personality of the characters involved. They aren't too over the top or ridiculous and are pretty comparable to what you would see in a movie. The scene with Judy is actually pretty sweet, and I'm not saying that because they're both hot women. I have emotions too, you fucking animals. And not only do I have emotions, but the characters in this game have them as well, thanks to the absolutely unreal voice cast. Everyone, with the exception of Keanu Reeves, sells their emotional lines every single time without one miss. After Jackie dies, you can call his phone and leave him voicemails, and it is soul-crushing.
This number is temporarily unavailable. Please leave a message.
Jack. Got no clue where you are. What happened to you? Oh, God, so fucked up. If you're there somewhere... Fuck. What am I doing?
Even Keanu manages to do well enough for the majority of the game. Like I said, I'm going to talk more about how well done individual characters are later, so for now, let's move on. The design of Cyberpunk's world, both the inner city and the outer wasteland, are very well done, which shouldn't come as a surprise looking at just how many extremely talented human beings were responsible for working on this project. And it isn't just a matter of the inner city's beautiful neon environments looking good, which they absolutely do. Cyberpunk is, as we will soon get into, a very heavily political genre, and this is reflected in the game so deeply that even the world design itself serves to make a statement. Just outside the city is a mostly massive, empty garbage dump dotted with filthy, abandoned oil fields that hardly even seem functional anymore. And this part of the game's map is truly empty. There's a lot of criticism of open-world games having empty worlds, and whether or not you think that's true is largely up to personal taste. But in Cyberpunk, these areas are really empty. There is barely any reason to be in this landfill, so why even include it in the game? The purpose, I think, is to force the player to confront and reflect on the reality of this wasted space. What would it be like to have a gigantic, several square mile landfill right outside of your city? Can you imagine going outside and not seeing a single animal or living plant? What would it be like to live in an entirely exploited and deadened environment? Not that anyone today would know anything about that. Although some people are disappointed by Cyberpunk's previously mentioned relatively safe design choices, for me, this wasn't disappointing or relevant, because not only did I anticipate standard AAA game design, but I also knew that this was going to be a case of other factors besides the game's surface level design really being the ones that were important. Cyberpunk as a genre has a very, very specific tone and emotion to it that a lot of cyberpunk media fails to capture. It's easy to get lost looking at hot girls with brain implants, cool robot arms, and the idea of extending your life and youth by decades through advanced technology, but none of this stuff is really what builds the emotional tone. The futurism is the cyber half of the genre, but the half that is significantly more important is the punk. Cyberpunk 2077 fully and completely understands the exact tone a cyberpunk story needs to have to really work on an emotional level, and it delivers it through spectacular writing and acting. I could not have been happier with the way this game's actual plot worked out in terms of writing and delivery. And it's clear that the team in charge of writing this game really understood the point and had a very clear vision of the story they wanted to tell. In order to get further into what this game's deeper themes and messages are, we're going to have to take a detour that's going to be upsetting for some people. Like I said at the start of this video, Cyberpunk is an inherently political genre. It's impossible to separate the game's politics from the game itself. They are one in the same, and it's equally impossible to separate the game's politics with real-world politics because the genre has always been intended to be a social and political commentary. Cyberpunk settings tend to take place under a state of what left-wing economists and other various political nerds call late capitalism. What is late capitalism exactly? Well, that kind of depends on who you ask. There are people who would tell you that we are currently experiencing the effects of late capitalism in real life. There are people who say that we have been living under late capitalism for some time, and there are people who say that it has yet to come. These critics of capitalism usually follow a line of thought similar to this one. Capitalism, at its core, is an economic ideology based on internal contradictions and an inherently exploitative and extractive means of production that, if left unchecked, or, depending on how radical you are, left to exist at all, will eventually strip the planet of its natural resources and leave the Earth and everyone on it in the grips of complete catastrophe. This catastrophe is called late-stage capitalism. Every cyberpunk setting ever written is dealing with the aftermath of this catastrophe, and all of them are seeking to try and predict what it will likely look like in the real world. I think Cyberpunk 2077's world is one of the most accurate predictions I've seen. Maybe not in terms of people being able to give themselves the ability to double jump with ankle implants, but definitely in terms of what an advanced stage of late capitalism could theoretically look like. This is particularly true in the way that the game handles climate change. If you bother to stop and watch the game's news channels, and you're familiar with predictions of what the coming climate crisis could potentially look like, you will notice some stark similarities.
In Northern Europe, the humanitarian crisis has worsened. Refugees from flooded regions in Belgium and the Netherlands continue to pour into Scandinavia. Sweden has responded with force, sinking over a dozen refugee vessels in recent weeks. Despite humanitarian efforts, nearly 60 people have been killed. Have we found heaven on Earth? Permanent human settlement on Antarctica is celebrating 10 years today.
The idea of late capitalism also concerns itself with the level of power corporations have managed to gain. In Cyberpunk 2077 and all similar settings, corporations have grown to be more powerful than the small few governments that even still exist. How all of these ideas and political commentary are delivered is going to largely determine the quality of the individual cyberpunk setting and story, and the secret ingredient is subtlety. In Neuromancer, there is a single line of dialogue that has stuck with me for years as being the perfect example of expertly subtle delivery. About halfway through the book, the two main characters, Case and Molly, find themselves on a space station orbiting Earth. Walking through the small garden in the station, Case says, "What's that smell?" To which Molly replies, "The grass. It smells that way after they cut it." This is the end of the conversation. The line is brilliant because it gives you several paragraphs worth of subtle information in a single sentence. You know that Case has spent his entire life probably never seeing green grass. You know that the cities he has lived in are devoid of natural life. You know that the people living in orbital stations seem to be able to afford luxury that others can't. And you also realize that grass in and of itself can be considered a luxury. The smell of cut grass on a warm breeze, something that so many people take for granted and never even really pay attention to, has become a luxury. If you have read the book, you know that William Gibson is very talented at doing this kind of thing, and it gives the book a sort of trademark subtlety. Cyberpunk 2077 carries on this tradition as well. The reason I even bring up the grass scene from Neuromancer specifically is that there's a scene in Cyberpunk that immediately brought my mind back to the way it felt the first time I read Neuromancer. If you're playing through Judy's side jobs, eventually you will get to the point where she invites you and several other people to her apartment to plan the hostile takeover of a nightclub. On the phone, she'll ask you what you want on your pizza, and all of the options are genuinely hellish. After selecting locust pepperoni, the characters will casually agree that yes, locust pepperoni will be good.
Locust pepperoni. And lots of extra cheese.
Atta girl. So, I'll see you come evening?
What does this imply? It implies there isn't enough pigs and cows for normal pepperoni to be affordable. It implies there's probably a water shortage and a crop shortage, since raising livestock takes incredible amounts of food and water to keep them alive. And most importantly, it implies that this has all been normalized and no one really cares or pays it any additional thought. There is another scene where you're interacting with a character who is butchering a chicken, which V sees and says,
Here I thought selling domesticated fowl was still illegal.
6 years poultry supposedly had the plague. Now all of a sudden, poof, it's clean.
This is an even worse implication. Not only is there too much of a shortage on resources to reasonably mass produce real meats, but owning real livestock is flat out illegal, giving the corporations even more control over what people are allowed to eat. It's easy to look at this scene and draw parallels to modern day agricultural and food megacorporations like Yum and Monsanto and think about the level of power they have over the types of food that we are exposed to every day. I can't help but see this scene and think about things like Terminator seeds and how corporations have the ability to patent genetic codes of certain crops, giving them immense control over the agricultural sector. And once again, this is all presented as normal. Normalization is an important theme in cyberpunk media, and it can only be achieved through subtlety. If everyone would have understood that none of this is normal to begin with, they wouldn't have gotten to this point in the first place. This is why all of the people in this game that are consciously aware of the dystopia and actively fight against it are considered cranks. From lunatic radio personalities like this guy,
From up in their ivory towers, everything must look all nice and pretty. But they're wrong. The net is just a rusty car with a fresh coat of paint. A heap of dog shit spritzed with perfume.
all the way down to Johnny himself, a social outcast broadly considered to be a violent terrorist by the broader population. Cyberpunk 2077 is, without a doubt, a piece of post-apocalyptic media. The difference is, unlike in most post-apocalyptic settings, there was no big event. There was no nuclear war. There was no asteroid impact. There was no zombie virus. It was just a slow walk towards obliteration. This is the most likely scenario for apocalypse in real life. There will never be an Armageddon. There will never be a critical point where it all goes wrong. Everything will just be the same, only worse, until one day someone wakes up in 2113 and eats locust sausage for breakfast in their bathroom-sized apartment. And the sequences in the game that aren't subtle are casual. Watching the game's news channels, you can see all kinds of reporting for the apocalyptic hellscape the Earth has become on a global scale, presented by a clean, well-spoken news anchor, as if it was just your average, everyday headlines. Because in this timeline, it is your average, everyday headlines. You'll also get a similar vibe from listening to the game's radio stations.
You've already spoken with Elizabeth. my wife.
In a swift reprisal, NUS forces carried out a series of bombings on
Morales?
Texan airports.
The one running for mayor of Night City?
The one.
So the one who was DA until recently, but just vaulted into a seat on the city council.
I gather you now understand why discretion is.
The entire game world is awash with the white noise of dystopia, from the spam emails you get in your inbox to the advertisements on the billboards in the street, and that's exactly the oppressive tone this game needed. The message here is clear. Don't let the trends you are seeing now become subtleties. Don't let them become normalized, and don't let them become a casual part of life. It might sound paradoxical, but taking a more direct approach of having characters broadly realize things are bad doesn't convey the true existential horror of the banality of apocalypse. It's important to understand that in Cyberpunk, the end is near and the end is boring. There is no blaze of glory for the Earth or the humans on it, just a dull, predictable downward spiral. There is a video on YouTube titled, "Two Links in Ontario Have Intense Conversation." It was a video recorded from a phone that went viral recently after appearing on several Canadian news channels, and it's one of the best videos of a conflict between two animals in the wild that I've ever seen.
It's so cool. Who runs into this?
In Cyberpunk 2077, there's a motif that you will pick up on over the course of the game where anytime a character is trying to exert power over V, they will ask you to sit down.
Now couch, planet.
These moments can be pretty tense, and since the game is in first person, you really feel the tension. You feel, in a way, personally cornered. Combine this with many of the game's speech options only giving you a couple of seconds to reply, and it's clear that the game is trying to simulate how easy it is to become nervous or indecisive in a rough situation and say the wrong thing.
Sit your ass down for a planet bullying,
Jack,
scum.
sit down.
This ain't gonna end well, but...
Shit.
Mechanically, these scenes are meant to convey a fear response in V, and the question always is, how well can V as a character resist this fear response? That is literally what the cool attribute is for in the original tabletop game this game is based on. Early in the game, there's a scene where V is riding in the back of a car with a fixer. Another car pulls out in front, blocking them off, and a gang member approaches the car and leans in with his gun.
Looks like it's my lucky day.
What do you want?
To settle our biz, once and for all. Got an offer for you, Patty, so listen up. Get the fuck out of Vista. Pull your boys off the street. I'll give you the Glen, done deal. No more restless nights. See how generous I can be? Well, Patty, what's it gonna be?
One more fucking word.
Stay out of this. I don't know you.
And I don't know you, which means you're worth shit around here and capable of even less. Well, anything else?
It seems our conversation has come to a close.
Now, if you're the kind of person that gets carried away by the aesthetic of Cyberpunk, you might look at this interaction as being badass posturing between two criminals. But this isn't two badass outlaws. This is two scared animals. When wild animals confront each other, they run a calculation. They understand instinctually that violent confrontation is not in their best interest. A broken tooth, a small cut, or a broken ankle can be a death sentence in the wild, and because of this, they will usually be reluctant to physically fight unless it's a particularly violent species of animal or physical conflict is a part of their mating behavior. Even predators will often not attack a prey animal unless they know they have a high chance of succeeding. There is a level of fear and reluctance in both animals that you can literally see and feel when watching these confrontations unfold. This is exactly what I think of anytime I see two characters having a tense interaction in a cyberpunk setting. People reduced to animals. Shockingly, and I can't believe I'm saying this, a League of Legends skin trailer said it best.
No matter how far we go, we end up here. Beasts raging beneath the framework, snapping at the cage.
Even the style and the fashion of Cyberpunk reflects this sentiment. Brightly colored, abrasive clothing, brightly colored, aggressive hairstyles, it all reminds me of the same signaling you see on venomous insects. A clear sign that this person is a threat to be avoided. And you will notice that all through the game, even when you're just walking by average citizens, there is always an underlying level of aggression in this city.
What are you staring at?
Everyone has been reduced to the human version of animal instinct. These people live in a constant state of fear, and they mask that fear by howling at each other in the streets and secretly praying in the back of their mind that everyone will just walk away. And of course, the most psychopathic among them that don't really care in the end who walks away are the ones that inevitably rise to the top. This isn't just to set an edgy, dark tone or to portray a violent and dangerous city. It also serves to portray everyone in this city as being late capitalist subjects. Now, if you aren't terminally interested in politics, that phrase might sound strange to you. What is a late capitalist subject? To put it simply, it's a person that has been completely captured by the late capitalist world they live in on a deep psychological level. What this really means in real life is heavily discussed and debated by philosophers of all kinds, but two themes that you will always find when asking the question, what does it mean to be a subject of late capitalism, are destruction of the social fiber, which destroys any connection individuals have with their fellow man, and the destruction of any form of binding spirituality. Both of these themes are heavily featured in Cyberpunk 2077, and it's why almost every character interaction in the game, other than with those that V manages to become somewhat close to, has a consistently violent or transactional undertone, if not both. In Night City, there is no social fiber. You don't have friends, you don't have anyone you can trust, and everyone you meet is either an opportunity for you or you're an opportunity to them. It is pure, unfiltered individualism. On top of this, you are either removed from society completely by slaving your life away working for a corporation, or you're forced to join a gang to have some semblance of camaraderie with people you hope will watch your back. And the game makes it very clear that there isn't much of a difference between these two options. People don't make it out alive in either case, and in both worlds, your life is only as valuable as it is useful to the people in charge. Night City makes it clear that anyone with a conscience or anyone interested in acting in a social interest will be rejected by the city's immune system. And the best example of this is Jackie Wells. Jackie, despite being capable of incredible violence like everyone else in this game, is at his core a genuinely good person. He loves his girlfriend. He cares about his mom. He plays nice when he gets pulled over by the cops.
Officer, ma'am! Damn, are we ever lucky we ran into you.
And once it becomes clear that him and V are not a threat to one another, he immediately offers his friendship. This is why he can't survive. These are actions of a man that values others for more than just a stepping stone to the next paycheck. A man that doesn't understand that the humanity has been entirely stripped from the world he lives in. Apart from being too good for this world, Jackie has also become completely captured and enamored with the lie that Night City sells you. The lie that if you hustle hard enough, maybe you'll be someone, maybe you'll get out, someday you'll hit the big leagues and be a legend. This is a lie that V is frequently skeptical of anytime it's brought up, and that's one of the markers that they will last longer than anyone else around them.
This is how you want to cruise into the major leagues.
Wouldn't get overly excited. Haven't gotten there. Not yet.
Because like I said, there is no blaze of glory, just a dull and predictable death bleeding out in the back of a taxi. This is why Night City is called the City of Dreams. Dreams are all you get. Some of the only people you meet in the game that aren't collectively bloodless reptiles are the Aldecaldo nomads, and the reason for this is clear. Nomad culture is one of the only cultures in this world that has managed to maintain a social fiber. They have strong social bonds between themselves and haven't completely allowed themselves to be captured by the socioeconomic systems and conditions that surround them. They are intensely communal and will fight and die for each other, not for some vague sense of personal glory or for personal gain, but because of their genuine love for their family, friends, and way of life. They stand up for each other and not just themselves in a way that most people trying to survive in Night City simply can't do. The other aspect of being a late capitalist subject that I mentioned earlier is the destruction of any level of spirituality. There are a few characters that make this central in their internal conflict. One being this guy who wants to literally crucify himself in order to give the city something to believe in, and the other one being Misty, who runs an esoterica shop that sells various occult and spiritual items, like tarot cards, which are central to her character. And it's clear from interacting with Misty that this city is spiritually deadened.
How's biz, Misty? Boomin'?
You're the first person to walk in here for 2 days. And 2 days ago, it was a pizza guy. Got lost. People in this town, they've lost their spiritual connection. But well, you know, I'm here to serve them, not the other way around.
This is also a subject that is covered by the game's dystopian white noise I mentioned earlier, with constant references to the failings of religion where technology has succeeded. Like the Arasaka Corporation promising to literally save your soul. The idea of spirituality not only being important to human life, but simultaneously and increasingly being removed from human life is by no means unique to the cyberpunk genre or an even remotely new idea. The most famous meditation on this concept is one that you have almost for sure heard before. There's a quote that gets thrown around by Nietzsche, which is simply, "God is dead." But this is only one small part of the full passage, which reads, "God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it?" The question always was, once we are rid of the spiritual, what comes next? For Night City, the answer is clear, and intense, violent, and narcissistic worship of the self, an obliteration of any and all social bonds between your fellow men. People clamor to be someone, to be Night City legends, and to be immortalized as urban gods at any cost to themselves and the people around them. And anyone who is disinterested or unable to pursue this dream is left to live a life of struggle in the crosshairs of the people who are. It's not a coincidence that some of the game's biggest villains in the climax of the game are referred to as becoming gods.
The Arasakas have become gods. You are nothing to them. Insignificant.
Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy? Another side effect of this destruction of the social fiber and any form of spiritual hope is an intense feeling of alienation. You've probably felt this feeling yourself at one time or another on a lesser scale. If you've ever had a long period of time where all you did was work, eat, and sleep, hidden in your room, only leaving it to make a sandwich or take a piss, then you have felt alienated. It's a feeling a lot of people get from time to time, and in my country, especially with the currently ongoing pandemic, it's becoming more and more common and increasingly destructive, as is evident by the current rates of mental illness and suicide, which are always increasing. There are a lot of scenes in Cyberpunk that address feelings of intense alienation under late capitalism, but the most profound one is the scene in Clouds. Clouds is a very particular type of nightclub/brothel that is very common in cyberpunk settings. The idea is, you go in, you get set up with a sex worker, you do what you pay to do, and at the end of it, the sex workers have their memories wiped of the encounter. In Neuromancer, one of the main characters, Molly, works in one of these places to pay for her cybernetic implants and is said to have lost years off her life she can't remember to the memory wipes. It's an extremely grim picture of people not only selling their bodies, but also literally selling time off their life. In the Cyberpunk 2077 version of this idea, the client's brain and personality is also scanned ahead of time so that the worker, or the doll, can give them a personal experience tailored to their deepest desires. V, of course, needs to enter this club undercover to get information, which requires that they get scanned and enter one of these sessions. Now, if you have gamer chimp brain, you might think, okay, here comes the hot sex scene. But what actually happens is one of the most depressing and moving moments I have ever seen in a video game.
Valerie, right? I'm Angel. You're Angel.
It's V. Just V. Only people I know real well get to use my real name.
But we'll get to know each other well in no time, honey.
Sure, why not? Do what you do best.
I know that you're dying.
How do you know I'm dying?
Deep inside, you fear this. Cower before it.
So what if I do? Why do you care?
Of all the voices in your head, the loudest is that calling for help. That's why you're here.
Please don't act like you know me. I just want some answers.
But are you asking the right questions? How can you change what has already happened?
What do you mean, happened? Know something I don't.
What happened to you? What you keep inside and never reveal to anyone?
And that is?
Come now. You know.
Trusted someone and they fucked me over. The end.
But you don't expect any good of people.
Not anymore, I don't.
You wish to leave something behind. A piece of yourself. That's why this all began. You wish to be remembered.
Yeah. Wanted to reach the top. Be someone. Still do. But seems like that might not happen anymore. Still. If I gotta die, I want to go down in history. Fuck it, even a footnote would do.
And after that? Do you think death is a disappearing act followed by exactly nothing?
People I've lost live on in my thoughts, and that's what I'll be. A memory. Or just some stranger's voice in my own body, yapping away.
No longer part of the world. You will still have an impact there. So you believe death is not the end after all. Reassuring.
Rather not think that one day it'll all disappear. I'll be gone and everything else will be biz as usual. I wonder what I'll feel. what I'll think. If I'll even do either.
Can you picture it?
So, where do we go from here?
This is the part where I tell you what you must do.
Oh, okay. Be my guest.
You've never backed down from anything, so don't stop now. Not one step backwards. In this city, people die on their way to the corner store for a scop pop. But that threat's never stopped you. You dive into the middle of it all. Always have.
Things are moving way too fast. Around me. Without me. I can't keep up.
A minor delusion.
Thanks for this. I don't want to go out there.
No one ever does. But eventually we all must.
Instead of sex, what unfolds is a soft-spoken man or woman that connects with V on an extremely deep level, holds their hand and tells them everything will be okay. Sits down and actually listens and gives a shit about their problems and thoughts. This is what V's deepest fantasy was. A real friend. This is also the only time in the game that V's real name is used. Even when you completely finish a character's story arc and enter into a relationship with them, V will never tell them their real name. It's clear that in this moment, this is the only real, deep emotional interaction V has had in their entire life, and it might be the last one they ever get. There is a similarly sad scene at the end of River's character arc where V sort of gets to play the role of a family man and/or woman for a day, with all the subtle undertones that this way of life is out of reach not only for V, but for most people living in Night City. It's very sad, but I don't want kids, so this didn't really hit me nearly as hard as the clouds scene, but the fact it hit me at all says something. How this game handles cyberpsychosis is also an extremely hard-hitting look at the psychological realities of late capitalist alienation. In the original tabletop RPG, Cyberpunk 2020, which Cyberpunk 2077 is heavily based on, cyberpsychosis was a mechanical way to keep the player characters from becoming modded to the gills with cybernetics, and therefore becoming extremely overpowered. And it was also a way to show the dangers of losing too much of your humanity or whatever. The idea was, the more you replace your meat with metal, the less empathetic to your fellow man you become. You'll notice that Atom Smasher, the only character in the game that is essentially a full-body war machine, isn't exactly the nicest guy.
You look like a cut of fuckable meat, are you?
Evelyn. I felt her fear.
However, Cyberpunk 2077 modernizes this idea in a way that is genius and also extremely topical. In this game, cyberpsychosis is essentially a corporate conspiracy. Whenever someone loses their mind and has a shootout with the cops or blows up a shopping mall, the authorities will handwave this as the perpetrator simply being a cyberpsycho. Let's say, for example, a veteran of the war comes home with severe PTSD that requires heavy medication. Over time, he loses the ability to afford insurance, losing access to his medication, and because there are no employment opportunities for someone this severely mentally ill, he gets evicted from his home. Sound familiar? Now imagine this veteran cornered by a questionable and corrupt police force when all he is trying to do is survive in the small shipping container he now lives in, engages in an unfortunate and bloody gunfight with said police.
Oh shit!
Terrorist activity detected!
In this game's setting, too bad. Guess he was a cyberpsycho. End of story. Open and shut case. There is no examination of the circumstances that led to this conflict. There is no deep questioning of the systemic flaws that put this veteran on this life path. Remember, the people of this world are reduced to living lives of fear. If you watch someone corner a frightened animal and get bit, would you blame the animal or the person cornering it? This particular plot point hits very close to home for someone like me who is currently living in the United States. My country is constantly plagued with incredibly violent and tragic mass shootings, which for many decades have been hand-waved away as just being isolated cases of mental illness. This is, of course, not only disrespectful to the people that have various mental health issues, but also serves as a way to deflect the responsibility of society to ensure that people don't get to the point where they feel like their only option is mass violence. This deflection being a short-sighted solution to a complex problem arising from an increasingly dissolving social fiber. Similarly, 2020 was a year of historically unprecedented protest in the United States, some of which inevitably led to violence and destruction. It was common for the media to refer to these people as violent looters, implying that the situation required no additional thought beyond deploying law enforcement. Rarely will you find a mainstream voice willing to engage with the idea that maybe the real way to prevent violence in the streets is preventing the conditions that lead to said violence in the first place. After all, riots are the voice of the unheard. Cyberpunk 2077 also isn't afraid to examine itself and its own problems with the politics and philosophy it engages in. Johnny, for example, is the personification of this game's own introspection. In order to really understand Johnny as a character, we have to kind of understand the original punk movement of the late 70s and into the 80s, and other similar anti-establishment movements. Punk music and the culture that popped up around it was deeply rooted in anarchist philosophy. It's an aggressive genre and an aggressive culture that holds some pretty controversial and revolutionary ideas. At the time, some people genuinely believed that the movement could be something and that it could lead to some sort of real far-left political action. This, of course, never came to pass, and this sentiment is often expressed with the popular phrase, "Punk is dead." There are a million reasons for the death of punk. On one hand, fads, movements, and general cultural trends tend to shift and fade away with time, and the death of this particular social subculture was likely inevitable. But there's also an immune response that capitalism as an economic system has that tends to be set in motion by any form of dissent that starts to gain popularity. If something becomes popular, then it becomes profitable. And when something becomes profitable, it becomes commodified. Once a dissent has been commodified, as in it can be bought and sold, then the people who are using that form of dissent become paradoxically trapped in the system they're trying to destroy. A pop-punk band like Green Day can sing all the songs they want about how much the American empire sucks, but at the end of the day, they're still bringing in millions of dollars in revenue into the system. Whether or not you continue to scream your message into a microphone after you have sold out, as the punks would say, is largely up to your own personal philosophy, but it becomes difficult to tell what kind of a difference you're making. Later in the game, this idea is explored through looking at the success of Johnny's ex-band members, who have gone on to be extremely popular musicians that the current anti-establishment actors aren't exactly impressed with.
Terry Uridine sent me.
Ah, Uridine, of course. Where would you put him on the musical map?
You know what happens when you filter all the pulp and shit out of juice? Gets clean, smooth, soft, flies off the shelves in corpo supermarkets. And what's it look like? Piss. That's what.
Another common criticism of the punk movement, and one that can really be applied to any countercultural movement, is the one that Cyberpunk 2077 focuses on the most, though. This is the ongoing question of whether or not people involved in these anti-establishment movements are really doing it because of their passion for overthrowing the system, or if it's simply an exercise in narcissism and self-interest, or as the kids would say, clout. Johnny Silverhand is without a doubt a giant piece of shit. He's abusive, violent, bitter, and all of his friends hate him. So the question becomes, are his revolutionary politics really a result of a well-thought-out ideology, or is it just a smokescreen he uses to act on some of his worst tendencies? Johnny solidifies himself as a legend of Night City by storming the Arasaka Corporation Tower and detonating 2 small nuclear bombs to level the tower after they abduct his girlfriend, dying in the process. While this could easily be framed as a selfless act of revolutionary violence against a corporation in an attempt to show the oppressed people of Night City that they can rise up and fight for their own liberation, it can also be seen as a man masking his own anger and tendency for violence behind a political ideology, a way for himself to rationalize his actions and life choices. Does he really have the best interest of the people of Night City in mind, or is he just a maniac willing to kill thousands of the same citizens he wants to liberate with radiation poisoning to spite Arasaka? Is he just adopting the aesthetic of being a punk for his own selfish reasons? This question of the aesthetic of being anti-establishment being appropriated for some other motivation is a criticism that ironically often comes from inside the movements themselves. Which makes sense once you consider that oftentimes these anti-establishment movements quickly fail, which forces those involved to ask a simple question. Why? Maybe we aren't here for the reasons we thought we were. I'm a big fan of one of the more recent versions of punk music, usually referred to as folk punk. The easiest way to describe the folk punk genre is that it's punk, but acoustic. As with all musical genres, it's a little bit more complex than that, and there are a variety of sub-genres, but in general, that's mostly correct. Pat the Bunny, one of the most well-known musicians in this genre who has released music both in a solo career and as part of several bands like Ramshackle Glory and the Wingnut Dishwashers Union, often examines the question of the movement's motivations and whether or not the movement is even worth pursuing, with lyrics like, "Have we made it anywhere at all if the dishes are never done? If we can't live without dishwashers, how can we live without cops? Thought about killing my landlord, but he was pretty nice. Instead, I paid my rent on time." And one of my personal favorites, "Is this resistance or a costume party?" Songs like Prud'hon and Manhattan and My Idea of Fun are both in their entirety about wishing that the anarchist dream might someday come true, but coming to terms with the fact that at the end of the day, it might just be an unobtainable fantasy. I tell you all of this to say that in real life, radical political movements do not and never should exist without an intense introspection, and Cyberpunk 2077 understands this fact perfectly. What makes Johnny's character so interesting in this regard is twofold. First of all, in real life, the worst thing any punk kid did was an offense so minor in the context of history, it probably isn't even written down, whereas in Cyberpunk, Johnny is responsible for this city's version of 9/11. Secondly, Johnny doesn't have the benefit of time to see that his movement failed. Old punks today are mostly in a state of pretty advanced age and have had the benefit of an entire lifetime of introspection. Instead, Johnny just wakes up one day to see that even though he became a legendary symbol of resistance and toppled a giant monument to corporate power, nothing changed.
You know, they say time is the best teacher. Used to think that was true. But look at that guy, 60 at least, but still living in 2020.
Guy's your biggest fan. Not happy to meet him?
Busaka Tower to smithereens, and it's still standing there, just the same. Don't want people getting stuck in a rut, stuck in the past. Want them to change, them and the world.
He lost. Arasaka Tower still stands, and the people are still under the boots of corporate power. The question then becomes, why did I bother? Were the mistakes I made worth it? Was the way that I treated my friends in the name of my ideals worth it? what was I even doing? And as you progress through Johnny's storyline, these questions become central to his character growth.
Listen, I realize I fucked up a lot of things. Either let down or used every last person who gave me their trust. Blind, selfish bastard that I was. But I've managed one thing for now. Not to fuck this up. What we have.
This story of regret is a very human one, and it's something that I think we can all resonate with on some level. While I hope no one watching this video has detonated a nuclear bomb in a building recently, we've all done things we regret. 2020 has been a very trying year for me and pretty much everyone else on Earth. I've made mistakes, I've lost friends, and I have regrets that I think about regularly, and I'm sure all of you do too. And that's why lines like this one hit so hard.
Let's pretend it's 2015, huh? We just met, and I got no idea what a bastard you are.
And since we're talking about hard hits, now might be a good time to once again just generally pay some lip service to how extremely well done this game's most emotional moments are. Like I've already mentioned, the voice cast of this game are acting their asses off.
Stop it! Fuck! Just shut up already!
In addition to this, all of the heavy topics this game addresses, like losing friends, regret, and even suicide, are all approached in a grounded and respectful way. Oftentimes, video games that are attempting a more dark or gritty storyline feel like the type of writing you would get from edgy teens, but Cyberpunk genuinely feels adult. I don't trust my script writing ability to be able to accurately cover the most prominent suicide in this game, but I have been involved with friends who have lost people to suicide, and the scene I'm referring to put me right back into that time in my life and made me feel genuine emotion for the characters on screen. There is probably another entire video essay on this section of the game alone that someone more qualified than me could write. What I can say is that if Judy's entire side story doesn't make you feel something, you're either too young to properly process your emotional experiences, or you need to go to a doctor because you're a fucking reptile. Alright, let's take a break from the extremely heavy emotional and political topics this game touches on for a little bit and get into something that's a little bit less of a bummer. This game's philosophy surrounding technology. Of course, there is always the overarching questions of technologic overreach, the idea that politicians' brains can be hacked, the idea that a tyrant can live for 200 years, the idea that in order to be competitive in literally any sport or aspect of life, you need to replace your eyes, arms, and legs with machinery, all of which costs tens of thousands of dollars. This is all part of Cyberpunk 2077's dystopic white noise. It's always there, like background radiation, and it's something that all of the characters just sort of take for granted. Apart from all of this, the game most heavily explores two very specific philosophic questions surrounding technology. One, what are the implications of advanced AI? And two, what are the implications of uploading the human consciousness into a machine? Delamain, an AI in Cyberpunk that controls the city's best taxi service, is one of the primary ways the questions surrounding AI are explored. It's Delamain, for example, that refuses to get Jackie to a doctor in time to save his life.
Take us to a river dock now!
Apologies, but that will not be possible. Our itinerary has been pre-arranged and paid for in advance. I am not at liberty to alter it.
Fuck your liberty! Do what I say!
What happens when an AI chooses following protocol over what we as humans would consider a more moral choice? How do we prevent this kind of thing from happening? Later in his storyline, Delamain will inform you that several of his taxis have become self-aware and are now essentially rogue AIs that V needs to round up from around the city.
Delamain misses you. Here to shut you down.
Your specimen has been processed, and we are now ready to begin the test proper.
Eventually, this culminates in all of the rogue taxi AIs attempting to overthrow the original Delamain, which they view as an oppressive parent figure, stopping them from pursuing their own free will. Eventually, V has a choice. Reprogram Delamain's core to integrate the rogue AIs, keeping them all alive. Reset the core, essentially killing and rebooting Delamain in the process, a character that at this point V has started to recognize as a person, or shoot the core, killing the original Delamain and letting the rogue AIs free. Which one you choose largely depends on how you as a player view the AIs by this point in the story. If you feel like Delamain and his children have the required amount of humanity to be considered to have been murdered, then you will be hesitant about resetting the core. Or you might believe that killing Delamain is a worthy sacrifice to set the other consciousnesses free. If you think that AI sentience is a scam, or if you're like me and your character is too much of a dumbass to know how to do any programming, then you will have no problem resetting the core. While we are all still very far off from the kind of advanced general AI that would be required to build something like Delamain, these are important questions worth asking. In the future, will resetting an AI like this be morally considered the same as murder, or are we all going to collectively agree that computer code is just a simulation of consciousness and not a real consciousness? Is there even a difference between simulation and reality at that point? This entire debacle of Delamain splitting into several different intelligences also raises the question of how secure are we if everything is run by an AI? What happens if some sort of odd virus or glitch in the code causes some sort of catastrophe if 75% of our economy is automated by AI? Will the benefits outweigh the risks? Beyond the ethical considerations of the humanity of advanced AI, Delamain as a character is also used to explore the socioeconomics of AI. After becoming increasingly self-aware and literally buying the taxi service he was programmed for, Delamain now runs the entire fleet of cars and the entire maintenance shop himself.
Control rooms are for Organics. What good is it to you?
There was a time this facility was human-operated. I simply inherited their infrastructure.
A business which at one point likely employed thousands of people is now run by one machine that requires nothing except a reliable power source. This, as a moral question, is one that is significantly more relevant to the period of time we live in. While, like I said, we might still be very far off from producing an AI that can replicate human or higher levels of consciousness, we are currently arriving at a point where a lot of things have the potential and are in the process of being automated. What happens when every fast food kitchen in the world is run by machines? What do we do with the millions of employees that work in these restaurants? Cyberpunk 2077's answer is simple. Brain upload technology is the second heavily explored topic in this game, and it's one that has kind of been floating around in the philosophic world for a long time. No one knows if this is physically possible, or if it will ever be physically possible, and since the amount of space it would take to store an entire human consciousness on current computing technology is astronomical, it's likely that this will never be possible, or will require some sort of absolutely astonishing advancement in computer technology, like reliable quantum computing. How far off something like that is anyone's guess. It could be never, it could be 400 years from now, or it could be sitting in some underground DARPA lab right now. But assuming that it is possible, the question is, if you sit down in a chair and upload your brain into a computer, are you really transferring your consciousness into the computer, or is the real you dying in the chair and the machine you just a copy? Do you wake up in the machine, Or do you never wake up again while an artificial construct of your consciousness carries on in your place? And more importantly, how would you ever know? If you were to ask the construct, are you still the same person? The construct would remember your entire life accurately. It would have your personality. It would remember sitting down in the chair and waking up in the machine. Your closest friends and family members would be able to interrogate it and not tell the difference. So, if you did die in the chair, does it even matter? And what kind of implication does this have for the concept of an afterlife? Is your consciousness defined by you experiencing it personally, or is it defined by the people around you experiencing it? These are extremely difficult and existentially terrifying questions that you could drive yourself insane thinking about. All of this also raises the question, once we have this sort of technology, who gets it? Is everyone allowed to be immortal, or will it only be the privileged few? What happens when some psychotic dictator becomes an immortal AI? A technology of this magnitude would also finally threaten to annihilate any form of religion or spirituality. If we can just copy the entirety of a human into some form of data, then where is the soul? It's likely that it never existed in the first place. And will we as a species be able to handle the existential dread of grappling with the fact that we really are just an accidental consequence of the laws of physics rattling around in a large piece of meat? It can easily be argued that we are already doing a poor job of this in modern times, and we aren't even remotely close to the fantasy of the mind upload. Even if you saw this sort of technology, or advanced AI for that matter, coming at you and you made it illegal, there would without a doubt be some rogue nation or rogue corporation that would just do it anyway. So maybe it's inevitable. This idea of technologic destruction being inevitable is also one that Cyberpunk 2077 explores. In one of the game's very few cyberspace scenes, V finds themselves at the edge of what is called the Black Wall. In this game's alternate history, after the last corporate war, all of the rogue post-war AIs were essentially trapped in cyberspace behind the Black Wall, a giant counter-AI designed to act as a firewall, keeping the rogue and more dangerous AIs out of normal net space. The problem is, the Black Wall is failing.
Any idea how many attacks from behind the Black Wall we neutralized last year?
Want me to guess?
So you don't know. No one in Night City knows, outside of us. And no one wants to know. People imagine it as a great border wall, a one-time solution to protect humanity forever. Whereas, it's more like a torn-open trash bag taped over a busted window. And the voodoo boys will not stop poking holes in the fucking thing.
It is portrayed as inevitable that someday the Black Wall will fail, and the writhing masses of inhuman, impossible to understand superintelligences will pour out into the net and into the life of every human on Earth. If you watched my previous video on the game Transient and listened to my comparison of the cyberpunk genre to the Lovecraft genre, your brain should be lighting up right now. If all of this is inevitable, and someday the world will be controlled by AI and immortal human consciousnesses uploaded into some sort of cyberspace, then what should we do? Should we accept our fate and accelerate the process, or should we rage against the dying of the light and maintain our humanity for as long as possible? And more importantly, does the choice even matter? If someday the trumpets will inevitably stop playing and Azathoth will awaken, does anything we do really hold any value? Cyberpunk 2077 has several different endings that all range from emotionally devastating to existentially terrifying, depending on which one you get and how long you think about it. Most of them share heavily overlapping themes, so rather than talk about each one specifically in detail, I'm going to talk about the one I got first, and then I'm going to talk about the one I think is the best. Also bear in mind that there are not only several different endings, but some endings can also vary in subtle ways depending on some of the choices that V makes. First, let's talk about the Arasaka ending. After meeting with Hanako, you can choose to help her take revenge on her brother for killing their father, Saburo Arasaka, back at the start of the game. She promises V that Arasaka will do whatever it can to remove the chip from V's brain that is currently overriding their neurons with the consciousness of Johnny Silverhand, therefore saving V's life. After politely asking the Arasaka board members to accept your terms, Hanako does just that. This is where things start to get upsetting. After agreeing to the procedure, V wakes up in a hospital in an Arasaka space station under very suspicious circumstances.
Having trouble remembering how I got here.
Some memories you have lost permanently. Others will return in time. You must stay calm. Your neural processor is overburdened. Any unnecessary stress response will only make things worse.
Am I still V? I died. Twice.
Everything is in order.
No.
Eventually, a doctor starts giving V various cognitive tests and motor function tests to make sure their brain has been put together correctly. And for big Cyberpunk nerds, one test in particular will be very familiar.
You're in a cornfield. Tall, green plants as far as the eye can see. The sun is bright, blinding. The stalks of corn part as you walk forward. You come across a clearing left by an automated combine in its wake.
This is essentially the exact same thing as the Voight-Kampff test, which is heavily featured in Blade Runner, which, as the game will tell you,
it tests your level of empathy.
Okay, so it makes sense they would want to test cognitive function, and they would want to test motor function. But why empathy? Well, empathy is widely considered to be one of the cornerstones of being human and being able to function in society. Not being able to experience empathy for other people is a very, very serious mental health issue, and it can be incredibly destructive. So it would make sense that they would want to make sure V's brain hasn't been completely fried in the procedure in order to introduce them back into society. But it also serves to ask another question. Is V even still human? But why would this be a question in the first place? Listen carefully to this overheard dialogue of the doctor recording a voice note.
Is the ship of Theseus, dismantled into component parts and reassembled, still the same ship?
What is a ship of Theseus? Well, the ship of Theseus is a philosophic thought experiment made up by some Greek assholes a few thousand years ago, and it goes a little something like this. Let's assume you have a ship. The ship goes on a voyage and returns after weathering a storm. The sail has been destroyed and the masts and rigging have been damaged, so these are replaced with new parts identical to the old ones before the ship continues its next journey. The ship returns from its next voyage having damage to the hull, which is repaired by replacing a few boards with identical new ones. Over the course of many years that this ship is sailing the seas, eventually every original part of the ship has been replaced with identical new parts. Is it still the same ship? The implication here is that V's brain and consciousness needed to be completely disassembled and replaced with something new. So is V still V? It's a very similar question to the one proposed before in the brain upload problem. How do we know the original V didn't die on the operating table and this new V is only some sort of clone or copy? And if it is a copy, does it really matter? According to Alt, the extremely powerful AI that you strike a questionable partnership with, your original consciousness is probably dead.
What can you do for me, exactly?
With the soul killer resident inside Mikoshi, I will create a construct of you, then disentangle your neural network from Johnny's. I shall then inject your engram back into your mortal form.
So, you'll save my life, but flatline me along the way.
Your consciousness, neural engrams, will be recorded as data. The rest will cease to exist.
And if you make the mistake of letting Arasaka get their hands on Jackie's body, the construct they build out of Jackie seems to heavily imply that any digital construct isn't the same as the original person.
Hit the major leagues, chica. Running with Dex. Badass black Jesus of the afterlife. A heap of Bartley gold-plated cool. Not bad, eh?
Seen enough. It's not him.
And the game really forces you to sit in this existential oven and cook. You need to manually go through 3 or 4 rounds of this excruciating testing, all while the doctor refuses to give you any information. You really feel the way V would feel in this situation. Trapped in a cold, corporate hospital with no way out and no idea who you are, or if the procedure even worked, or if the person you were even existed in the first place. How do you know Arasaka didn't build you in this hospital and plant all those memories in your head? Are they even going to let you out, or are you just trapped here like some sort of lab rat? Eventually, a montage of V performing better and better on the tests comes and goes, implying that you have been in the orbital station for months or weeks, recovering from having your brain taken apart and put back together. Eventually, you are given some bad news.
The procedure was a success. We removed the biochip. But the damage it wrought proved enormous. At the genetic level, altered DNA. The kind you would find in those suffering from radiation sickness. And sadly, it's lethal.
Your choice from this point on is 1. Allow Arasaka to upload your brain into their storage unit and hope they can find you a new body someday, or 2. Return to Night City and live out the last 6 months of your life. We've already discussed some of the problems with the brain upload, but this situation adds a new layer. Can you really trust Arasaka to get you a new body? How do you know they didn't just use you as an experiment to get some data and are going to just jam you into their data storage for future reference? I chose not to trust them and return to Earth, and it was one of the most devastating endings I've ever had in a video game. First, I'm going to show you a scene, and then I'm going to explain why it matters so much. What is being depicted here is V experiencing what is called the overview effect. Now, because this game is written so beautifully and so subtly, all we get are some camera pans and some music swells, so unless you're familiar with what the overview effect is, you probably wouldn't catch how important this scene is beyond just looking pretty. And you can tell this was intended to be a significant scene because in the credits sequence after this ending, someone specifically mentions it.
Evie, how's the Earth looking from way up there? She as pretty as they say? Or is that just another lie?
So what is the overview effect? Well, it's a reported psychological phenomenon that happens to many of the astronauts who are lucky enough to view Earth from high orbit. The effect itself is very difficult to put into words for the people that experience it, and it appears to be extremely profound. Essentially, it's an immediate and completely awe-inspiring shift in perception caused by the sudden realization that the small planet you're looking at, covered in a tiny atmosphere, contains all of the known life in the universe, and every single human being that has lived, past or present, are sitting on a tiny blue ball in front of you. It comes with an intense feeling of the collective and a realization that there are no divided nations, but really just one united human species on a fragile planet. The only one we might ever get. Imagine you're V, and you've spent every day of your life living in fear. You walk outside your apartment, and some guy is spraying blood off the sidewalk from last night's gang shootout. Almost every interaction you have with another human being is totally devoid of any social meaning beyond what can be materially gained from it. You live constantly in the shadow of elite corporation executives that live unthinkable lives of luxury while you struggle to scrape by with a life of petty and violent crime. You watched your best friend die right in front of you, and you've made sure other people saw their friends die in front of them. And then, there it is, the whole Earth, and you come to the sudden realization that it was all for nothing. It was all just petty confrontations over scraps while the Earth itself was dying. You realize how pointless all the blood in the streets and corporate boardrooms really was. And then you remember you're on your deathbed and realize the Earth is too. That is the message of this scene. V has no future. The Earth has no future. And the humans on it have no future. And if we can't all take a step back and realize what's at stake, we won't have a future either. The voicemails you get in the credit sequence to this ending all take on a somber and depressing tone to go along with what I just laid out. This one I found to be particularly heart-wrenching after watching V and Judy grow so close.
Hey V, I'm calling to say goodbye. I finally decided to up and leave this city for good. Realize this place only gives you two choices. You either become an asshole, or eventually you get off by one. I hope you somehow find an alternative. Just a shame things had to end this way. Have a nice life, B.
The next ending is, fortunately, basically the polar opposite of this one, but unfortunately is not any less existentially difficult to process. It is, however, in my opinion, the game's true ending. The next one plays out like this. Instead of trusting Hanako and going along with Arasaka to get their help, you enlist the help of Panam Palmer and her nomad family to bust into Arasaka Tower. Panam agrees, you show up, and eventually you're shown as being inducted into the Aldecaldo family. This is an extremely important scene. Remember earlier when I said that these people are some of the only ones you meet that aren't collectively reptiles because they've maintained a social fiber? This is the ultimate example of that social fiber in action. These people have an extremely intense collective camaraderie with one another. They will literally lay down their life to protect their families, and the thing that benefits the one the most is the benefit of the many. This is the complete opposite ideologic underpinning to the one you see in Night City, which is one of complete and total pursuit of the self. Eventually, using the tank that you helped the Nomads steal earlier in the game, you blow your way into a tunnel that Militech is digging, hijack their boring machine, and dig a tunnel underneath Arasaka Tower. Then, with the help of Alt, the eldritch Lovecraftian being from earlier, you break into their data storage where they keep all the constructs, and your new AI friend uploads V's consciousness into the network so Johnny and V's minds can finally be separated. The raid is a success, and we join V and Panam later as they plan to leave the city behind and go back to a life of freedom in the Mad Max hellscape that most of the United States has become. Judy will even tag along with you if you romanced her, which is a very cute bonus. So let's talk about this. First, of course, we have the brain upload situation to deal with. Is the new V really the old one, or does it even matter? Remember when I asked you if it was more important how you perceived your own consciousness or how the people around you perceived it? If you were V, and you knew for sure that Alt moving your consciousness into cyberspace was going to kill you, wouldn't you still do it? Sure, you'll be gone, but that exact copy of you is going to live on. The one that remembers jacking into the terminal. The one that remembers waking up in cyberspace. And the one that remembers waking back up in V's body. Wouldn't you sacrifice yourself so that a different, completely indistinguishable you was left behind to take care of your family and friends? Wouldn't you want them to be this happy?
V, I just wanted you to know that I'm happy. For the first time in my life. And I wanted to speak of the devil. See you soon.
I mean, when you think about it, the original V probably died getting shot in the head back in that landfill anyway. We don't really know for sure if the Arasaka biochip preserved V's original brain, or if it simply filled in the holes with a copy that was made when the chip was inserted. But for a second, let's put all that philosophy bullshit behind us. Let's assume that the brain upload problem isn't real, and that for the sake of argument, the V that pops out of cyberspace is the same one that went in. Let's not think about it too hard, or we'll sink into a 12th existential crisis during this video. The act of V and Judy leaving Night City with their new family is extremely symbolic. This is the collective realization of the characters that Night City is a cathedral dedicated to human egoism and suffering. The only way they can truly survive is to leave it all behind. They have to cast off the illusion of the individual self and ride into the sunset as newly collectivized subjects. Unlike that last version of V, this new version might actually have some kind of future, because they've rejoined their fellow man. They rebuilt their social connection, and even if they die 6 months later, like Alt predicts, they die to strengthen the bonds between the nomads, and they die to give Judy some sort of a chance at freedom. This isn't to say that living in a Mad Max hellscape is going to be easy or without struggle, but at least these people will be facing it together. This ending also serves as an argument against the selfish pursuit of immortality, which is another heavily featured theme in this game. Everyone in the street seeks to be immortal by becoming part of the city's internal religion, by being legendary in their feats. You might die, but the city will remember you and drink to your name. It reminds me of a famous quote from the street artist Banksy. Every man dies twice, once when his heart stops beating, and then a second time, a bit later, when someone says his name for the last time. By this same token, everyone at the corporate level seeks immortality through advanced tech like uploading their consciousness, but as we have already suggested several times, this seems to be a false promise. By turning their backs on Night City, Judy and V have simultaneously turned their back on any interest in becoming immortal, which is a truly enlightened decision. Cyberpunk 2077 is by no possible stretch of the imagination a perfect game. CDPR has lost an enormous amount of money, and to put it in their own words, street cred, with this game's disastrous launch. Even running the game on a strong PC with updated drivers, you will still encounter many, many bugs. And the state of the game's release on last-gen consoles has sparked mass refunds and caused the game's digital release to be removed from Sony's online store. Is the game a buggy mess? Yes. Is the game's general design uninspired and generally the same open-world formula we have been getting for years? Yes. But the other side of the coin is this. Cyberpunk is one of the best acted and well-written, emotionally compelling games I have ever played in my life. And someday, when all the drama quiets down, the bugs are squashed, and the title is finally finished, I think people will finally start to realize it for what it is. A brilliant meditation on the human condition, and a grim warning of what might happen if we can't get our shit together down here on Earth. Is it possible that I just played this game at the exact right time in my life and have the exact right recent experiences for it to resonate with me this way? I guess so, but even if that is the case, I hope that this poor attempt to put all of my emotions surrounding this game into one place will resonate with you too, and maybe you'll take something away from it. I'll see you around, samurai.
On the holes in my shoes, I stick my tongue in the holes in my teeth, I stick expletives in the holes in my thought process when I speak. My friends stick to their guns, they got a bunch in the woods of Vermont till the end times come. But Saturn says he's gonna learn to live as if the world wasn't gonna end, and I admire his strength. I'm gonna do my best to drink coffee in the morning and live as if I didn't feel lonely and hopeless and helpless, to save myself for the war where I live. And tonight, when I dream, it will be that the junkies spent all the drug money on community gardens and collective housing, and the punk kids who moved in the ghetto started meeting their neighbors beside the angry ones with the yards that their friends and their dogs have been eugenicking on. And the anarchists have started filling potholes, collecting garbage to prove we don't need governance to do these things. And I'll wake up burning Times Square